with dyspraxia, another thing too that people don't really care about is that it also affects speech, which is a part of dysarthria and other speech-oriented words, which I was born with. And yeah, and that's another thing too. Some of these doctors just drive me insane on the fact that they dismiss dyspraxia, and I wasn't diagnosed with it, and as a matter of fact, most of the ones I was supposed to be weren't diagnosed, including my math impairment, dyscalculia, which is also known as math dyslexia. That too makes an impact on how the instructions are written, as with dyspraxia. But dyspraxia is based on movements also, and most don't realize how bad it can be when they're tormented, and especially when they don't understand how achievements are possible when they have to be a certain way, like with my other impairments as well. Like I looked at my math literacy after high school and before, and it was not where it's supposed to be, and the fact that I had to backtrack in order to know the truth and not just somebody's inability to understand that they are wrong about the approach. And I was like, okay, that's not gonna help. Like some kids, they grow up with these, but most don't even care about the impact that it has and don't care how it affects these people. Especially my siblings, they grew up with some form of it or another, and they weren't diagnosed with it. And I'm like, that's stupid. Because this is a year-round, everyday condition. This is not just, oh yeah, it's a once in a blue moon diagnosis. No, it's been out since the 1900s. And the fact that in the 1980s it was known as dyspraxia, but it was discovered in the 1900s. The French recognized it, and then I think it was the Americans. But the point of it is that it affects everything, not just one thing. It affects motor and both motor, fine and gross motors. Yeah, and that word is tricky too, because that has those both have different meanings if you use it in a whole different way. Like one is related to weight and like pay, like net pay and gross pay, which my mother taught me a while back about that, because she was an accountant. And yeah, and unfortunately with math, they didn't know how bad my math was, and they didn't recognize it as dyspraxia or dyscalculia. I might say the wrong. But I have a book on that too, and that is also in a medical book if you read the right one, because they're tricky in medical books because the word might not be in full. It might be only half or partial. That's why medical's so fucked up, because I read another book that had dyspraxia, but it was partial of the word. It wasn't the full word. And this is kind of where medical terminology messes up, because some don't read this and need to major time, because this is, like I said, it's a daily thing people have to live with. It's not just something that come and goes. Now there's some that believe it might show after the birth, which is true, but during the birth this might be affected by, like, if your child takes forever to walk, to read, or it's not at a moment where it is known to be. Like, some children will take longer to crawl versus walking, or they might, other way around, they might walk but not crawl, or they might come to a stand and never learn to crawl. And then I was like, uh-oh. Like, my mom was saying one time that I crawl backwards. And yeah, and watch out, because at backward is technically American. The S is the British version of backward. That's another problem too with learning the American and the British, and then other languages thrown in there. But this is partial of my story. But yes, I do have dyspraxia. It was not diagnosed, still not, which I don't know why these professionals just don't see this, don't care, don't take the time to care. Like I said, because children are also affected, girls and boys. If this is one of those odd type of medical because it's based off boys getting more recognition than girls, which I find very inappropriate for this type of condition, because it affects both girls and boys, not just boys. Because I noticed my brother, he wasn't always interested in learning in the same way I was, especially where he could get what he needs achieved correctly and more professionally as well. Like, he said he wanted to be this, and he's not. Having books based on what you want to do is not a sin. It's actually a good thing, but most people see it as a sin. Like, it's sinful to have this, it's sinful to have that, which I don't approve of. Because it's one of my morals, is having something that can impact your future and the future of others, especially. That's big. Like, when I took paraprofessional training, they gave me three books. Yeah, some might have more than that, but they gave me 3 starter books, and one was for first aid. The CPR might be a combo in first aid, because that's a part of it. They might have an additional book only on first aid and CPR. And then the water instructor and lifeguard. And then that year I got trained, I also worked with kids out of the water. So so that was the other thing too, because I can use the other things that I got certified for through the American Red Cross. So it wasn't just through just any organization or the school itself. That was through a large organization that, yes, a woman founded, because she believed she wanted to help others, not just money-wise, but medical-wise. And the story behind that was, she had heard stories when she was younger by her father, and she believed helping people regardless of her own health is more important, and in a way. And yes, and this is the way even the Bible is like that too. Even God's like that, and Jesus is like that. They will put their own beliefs aside, but they won't back off what they do believe. So it's like fruits of the Spirit. Same thing with having a medical condition. Fruits of the Spirit is essential in all, not just some, all, including dyspraxia. So if you're mean, like if you say, well, you're never going to succeed. With dyspraxia, we don't succeed like you do. It's not our, the way we do things. It's different. Like, our brains are wired differently than yours. So yes, we do achieve things just differently. So if, like, you may do something in 15 minutes where it takes a dyspraxic more than 15 minutes or more. So it's not just lazy or inappropriate stuff like that, because that's not how it's